People often believe childhood pain must look dramatic to leave scars. They imagine screaming homes, violence, cruel words echoing through thin walls. But some of the deepest wounds are almost invisible. A child can grow up surrounded by family and still feel emotionally abandoned, not because nobody was there, but because nobody truly noticed who they were beneath the surface. Their fears were overlooked, their emotions rushed past, their inner world treated like background noise. And over time, something strange begins to happen. The child stops reaching outward, stops expecting to be understood, stops believing their feelings deserve space at all. You may have felt this in moments when you automatically say, "It's okay," even when it isn't, or in the strange guilt that appears whenever you need comfort from someone else. Because children who were never truly seen often become adults who know how to disappear while smiling. And the frightening part is, many of them don't realize they're doing it, not until the loneliness becomes impossible to ignore. Not until they begin asking a painful question. What happens to a person who spent their whole life emotionally invisible?
People often believe childhood pain must look dramatic to leave scars. They imagine screaming homes, violence, cruel words echoing through thin walls. But some of the deepest wounds are almost invisible. A child can grow up surrounded by family and still feel emotionally abandoned, not because nobody was there, but because nobody truly noticed who they were beneath the surface. Their fears were overlooked, their emotions rushed past, their inner world treated like background noise. And over time, something strange begins to happen. The child stops reaching outward, stops expecting to be understood, stops believing their feelings deserve space at all. You may have felt this in moments when you automatically say, "It's okay," even when it isn't, or in the strange guilt that appears whenever you need comfort from someone else. Because children who were never truly seen often become adults who know how to disappear while smiling. And the frightening part is, many of them don't realize they're doing it. Not until the loneliness becomes impossible to ignore. Not until they begin asking a painful question. What happens to a person who spent their whole life emotionally invisible?
Emotional neglect is strange because it rarely announces itself loudly. It happens quietly, repeatedly, like water slowly eroding stone. No single moment feels devastating enough to explain the pain, but years later you realize something inside you was slowly disappearing the entire time. Children who are emotionally unseen often become adults disconnected from their own needs, not because they have none, but because they learned early that their feelings would not be deeply held by others. So they stop checking in with themselves altogether. You may have felt this when someone asks what you want and your mind suddenly goes blank, or when exhaustion feels easier to recognize than sadness, because your emotions were never given language, only endurance. And over time, this silence begins shaping your entire identity. You become hyper-aware of other people's discomfort while remaining strangely detached from your own. You apologize too quickly, over-explain yourself, feel guilty for taking up emotional space. Why? Because unseen children often grow into adults who believe love must be earned through usefulness. So they become caretakers, listeners, emotional shelters for everyone around them. But inside, something still aches, like carrying buckets of water across a desert while your own throat remains painfully dry. And eventually, the loneliness deepens into something harder to describe. Not rejection, not abandonment, something quieter. The feeling that nobody truly knows you because you were never taught how to let yourself be known. And the longer this continues, the heavier the invisible weight becomes.
The mind can ignore emotional pain for years. The body rarely does.
At some point, the loneliness buried beneath functionality begins surfacing physically. Anxiety appears without clear reason. Exhaustion settles into the bones. Rest feels uncomfortable instead of peaceful. Because a nervous system raised on emotional invisibility never fully learns safety. It learns vigilance. You may have felt this in moments where silence feels tense instead of calm, or the way certain small criticisms cut deeper than they should, as if they awaken something ancient inside you. That is the hidden reality of being unseen as a child. Your body became a house constantly waiting for emotional weather to change. And many people spend years trying to understand why they feel empty even when their life appears stable from the outside. But emptiness is not always caused by lacking love. Sometimes it comes from lacking recognition. There is a profound difference between being cared for and being emotionally understood. One keeps you alive, the other makes you feel real. Without that recognition, many unseen children grow into adults who feel strangely disconnected from their own existence. They move through life efficiently while secretly feeling invisible inside it, like ghosts performing human routines. And eventually, the body reaches a breaking point. A relationship collapses. Burnout arrives. A quiet sadness suddenly becomes impossible to outrun. And in that moment, many people realize something heartbreaking. They spent years trying to become lovable when what they truly needed was simply to be seen. But what happens after you finally recognize the wound itself?
Recognition changes everything. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, like dawn pulling shape from darkness. For many emotionally unseen people, healing begins with grief rather than relief. Because once you finally understand your patterns, you also begin understanding how long you abandoned yourself to survive. That realization hurts. You may have felt this after setting one small boundary and immediately feeling guilt afterward. Or after expressing vulnerability and feeling exposed for hours, as if emotional honesty itself were dangerous. Because for most of your life, survival meant staying emotionally manageable. Needs felt risky, visibility felt unsafe, so independence became armor. But eventually, the armor becomes heavy enough to suffocate the person wearing it. And that is where something begins shifting. Not confidence, not sudden transformation, just awareness. You start noticing how often you silence yourself automatically, how quickly you dismiss your own pain, how deeply you fear becoming inconvenient to others. And perhaps, for the first time, you stop blaming yourself for it. Because the child inside you was never too sensitive. They were simply navigating emotional absence alone. That realization carries both grief and relief together. Grief for what you never received, relief that your pain finally makes sense. And maybe healing is not becoming someone entirely new. Maybe it is slowly uncovering the person who existed underneath years of emotional adaptation. The version of you that never needed to earn the right to feel real. The version that was always there, quietly waiting to be noticed. People who were never truly seen by their parents often spend years searching for evidence that they matter. In relationships, achievements, attention, usefulness. But the wound was never simply about love. It was about recognition. About the ache of growing up emotionally surrounded, yet internally alone. And perhaps that is why invisibility becomes so exhausting over time. Because no matter how capable you become, some part of you still longs for what was missing in the beginning. Someone to pause long enough to truly notice your inner world. Not your performance, not your usefulness, you.
And maybe the deepest tragedy is that many unseen children become adults who continue overlooking themselves in the exact same way. Until one quiet moment changes everything. A moment where you finally stop treating your emotions like interruptions. A moment where you realized your sensitivity was never weakness. A moment where you understand that surviving emotional neglect required incredible adaptation. Because children do not disappear for no reason. They disappear when invisibility becomes safer than honesty. And perhaps the healing begins the moment you realize this. You were never hard to love. You were simply standing in rooms where nobody truly knew how to see you.